So, the last thing we're going to do is we are going to relate our discussion on WikiLeaks back to the question of how you can go about structuring your annotated bibliography and also your literature review. So, what I'm going to do now is explain how we can apply the ideas that we've developed around WikiLeaks to understanding the steps you need to take in your first two research projects. So, in terms of structuring your literature review and in terms of identifying the readings from your annotated bibliography that you are going to use in your literature review, you need to be thinking about the following questions. And what I'm going to do now is go through each one of those questions and explain how we've answered them in these sessions in relation to WikiLeaks and the things that scholars have written about WikiLeaks. So, what is your topic and why is it important? And what we've suggested here is that the WikiLeaks topic is important because it introduces several different ideas. Firstly, it allows us to think critically about the idea that changing media technologies can change society all by themselves. It also allows us to connect questions about the impact of digital media to long-running questions about the relationship between media and democracy, questions that have been around for several hundred years. And so, what we can see is that WikiLeaks is a topic that allows us to explore much more general, much more important questions about the relationship between media and politics. Then, the next thing you're going to be doing is saying, what are the main problems that your authors are trying to solve? That is what you're going to be finding when you research your topic is you're going to find authors who think that your particular topic matters for perhaps different reasons. Now, with regard to WikiLeaks, what we've seen is that for some authors, WikiLeaks represented the power of the people, if you like. It represented the way that evolving media technologies increase the potential and the possibilities for democratic participation by letting more ordinary people into the political process. And again, this is a process that scholars have been discussing for quite some time. It's a process that has been connected quite often in literature to the rise of the printing press. So again, it's something that relates to general theories of media influence. And what we're seeing here is that actually authors disagree on this. Some people think that WikiLeaks is a representation of digital democracy. And other authors think that it's a little bit too early to celebrate WikiLeaks in quite such unproblematic terms, that in many ways, and we're going to be exploring this more in relation to the Hassian reading, which you're going to be doing later on and which we're going to be exploring over on Perusal, that actually that question is much more complicated because the question is not simply how media technologies work, but how media technologies work in conjunction with business models and the idea that business models compromise the extent to which media act as democratic forces. But here again, what we've found out is that those questions aren't necessarily new, and that in many respects, WikiLeaks is a continuation of some of the debates around the relationship between entertainment, information, and profit that were explored in relation to 19th century printing press, the 19th century newspapers. And the third question you're going to be asking is, how are your authors trying to solve these problems in terms of theories, methods, and evidence? Well, I suppose one of the things that we've seen here is that in some senses, if you look at the work of someone like Yevgeny Morozov, he can be seen as continuing a trend of technological pessimism, I suppose, that we can relate to the early work of Harold Innis. That is, that for a long, when it comes to media theory and media research at least, there's a long tradition of authors who have been very cautious about celebrating the relationship between media, technological change, and democracy, and have sought to focus on the questions that lead us to believe that quite often technological innovation is something which deepens power differences within society. So, for example, you probably heard the phrase the digital divide, and that would be an example of those sorts of thinking. Are there significant disagreements among your sources over the nature of the problem at hand, what is to be done about it, and how to best go about researching it? Well, one of the things that we're going to be exploring is, for example, the way that Brian McNair's really optimistic utopian thinking about digital media technology and use is counterbalanced against Hassian's reading and his reading of and his notion of domestication. And again, we're going to be exploring that more in relation to the discussions around the reading over on perusal. And then the final thing that you're going to do is you're going to, in your research, position yourself in debate. So you've read 10 articles about the same topic and they've come up with 10 different reasons, probably not that many, but perhaps, as to why your topic is important. Which one are you going to side with, and which do you, and why are you going to do that? Speaking for myself, I tend to take a more dystopian view of things, and I have a reason for doing that. Um, I'm not necessarily sure. I think one of the things is that media industries are really good at telling us about their social benefits, about what they do that's positive to society, and many of those, and those things are important. It's important to see media industries as important things that can be hugely helpful in social life. I just kind of feel the role of critical research is to think about those things in a slightly more complicated way, and to look at some of the obstacles and barriers that stand in the way of media industries and media industries working in the way that we would like them to work. But, that's just an argument I would make. You're welcome to find your own argument. But those are the sorts of processes that you're going to need to go through in doing your annotated bibliography and also doing your literature review. And what we've done in this session is explained how you can go through those steps in relation to the Wikileaks case study. And again, the Wikileaks case study is interesting because it allows us to consider some very fundamental questions about the nature of media influence in relation to the way that media don't produce social change in and of themselves, but do so by collaborating with other sources of social power.